Thank you very much. This music, this Irish music, gives us the feeling of an Irish pub where the state president and a simple citizen speaks together. And that's the atmosphere which we need this evening. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, wir werden diesen Abend in Englisch halten, weil heute Morgen war der ganze Morgen auf Deutsch und unsere irischen Gäste konnten deshalb nicht sehr viel verstehen von dieser Sprache. Deshalb werden wir uns jetzt bemühen, uns die Sprache zu sprechen, die unsere irischen Gäste auch verstehen. First, I have to excuse our dean, who can't be here this evening, and so I will make a warm welcome to everyone here in this hall, and on Zoom, our colleagues from India, our colleagues from European continent, and our colleagues from the United States. So you see, it's not a local theme only, it's an international question. And with that, we will go to this problem. Dear Honorary Doctor of the Faculty of Theology, Professor Mary McAleese, dear Martin McAleese, who has written as an Irish senator the report into Magdalene Laundries, well known from the film Philomena with Judi Dench. We, ladies and gentlemen, Mary McAleese is a constitutional lawyer and a canon lawyer. She is an outstanding embodiment of the collaboration of civil and canonical jurisprudence in relation to children's rights. Her second dissertation, Children's Rights and Obligation in Canon Law, is about the integration of children's rights in the law of the Church. The Holy See has consistently promoted the Children's Rights Convention from the beginning and was one of the first in international law to ratify it. The recognition of the children's rights is symbolic of the recognition of human rights in the Church. The Church plays a great role, a special role as an advocate against child trafficking, child prostitution, child poverty, and for the right to education. Children are seen here in church law less as agents than as recipients of protective rights. However, there are hardly any instructions on how the observance of their rights is to be checked. There begins some problems. The fact in recent decades is even the most elementary rights of protection have neither been guaranteed, nor have the most serious rights violations by Catholic priests been punished, which is a scandal that shades the entire legal, ethical, and theological architecture of the Catholic Church. The motivation to write a dissertation in canon law was for Mary McAleese a consequence of the sexual abuse scandal that shook Ireland society to its core. In not a single case of sexual abuse was canon law able to do anything for the victims, nothing that would have benefited or helped them. The vital importance of the honorary doctor's foundational work for the Church was made clear during the Pope's trip to Canada this year. In the summer 2021, the remains of hundreds of students were found anonymously buried on the grounds of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia. Subsequently, remains of countless children have been discovered in other such schools. From 1840 until the closure of the last boarding school in 1996, some 150,000 children were separated from their indigenous families and sent to boarding schools where their own culture was to be exorcised. Corporal punishment, malnutrition, neglect, and sexual abuses by fathers, monks, and nuns were widespread. So Francis, in his trip into Canada this year, spoke of the pain he felt over the role that various Catholics had played in the abuses. That is a trivialization. It's not about individual misconduct, but about the Catholic Church as a whole. The incidents in Canada are reminiscent in similar crimes in Ireland faced by the then President Mary McAleese. She recognized that, in addition to the state, the Church must be called upon too. For this urgently needed structural reform of the Church, dialogue is needed between the jurisprudence of the Church and the jurisprudence of the state. Theological critique alone is not enough. What is needed is structural change in the institution with its current concentration of all power in celibate men. With the honorary doctor's exemplary commitment to the rights of children in state and church, the people who walk in darkness see a great light, as you every year hear in Christmas Eve liturgy. The people who walk in darkness see a great light. Isaiah, in the chapter 9, has already pointed out that the Prince of Peace relies on law and justice. Isaiah thinks that this Prince of Peace must be a boy, but we have to imagine today that is a girl. On this path, it could become possible to rediscover the beauty of the gospel in spite of the crimes. Pope Francis put it this way: the gospel's own beauty cannot always be adequately expressed by us, but there is a sign that never must be lacking. The option for the last, for those whom society or the church segregates and discards. Professor Mary McAleese will now speak to us to the topic Violence Against Children and the UN Children's Rights Convention, an involving story. May I ask your attention, please?
Okay. I think we music first, so you can relax. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to Professor Lauritsen. Thank you to our wonderful musicians. I've never had a musical introduction to a lecture before. I think I might make that standard practice. Thank you, a very big thank you to the university for the honour that was conferred on me and indeed 4 colleagues earlier today. It feels lovely to be part of the story now of the University of Lucerne, to be part of this community, and I thank you for that. And it's a nice way to start because the subject matter is not so nice. Huh? Violence against children. We know it can take many forms, none so egregious as those that involve the abuse of trust and the systemic protection of perpetrators rather than child victims by powerful institutions. The Catholic Church is one such institution. In recent decades, it has been confronted by a veritable tsunami of proven physical and sexual abuse of children within the Catholic Church institutions, carried out by church personnel and covered up by church authorities. The damage to the children is unspeakable. The damage to the credibility of the church is incalculable. It has potentially exposed an existential threat to the church, particularly in the West. Initially, the institutional church response was hesitant, self-protective, but now the Holy See appears to be seriously engaged in trying to rebuild not just the shattered trust of the faithful, but also its self-ideation as a champion of children in the mold of Christ. Its focus, however, has been almost exclusively on the issue of clerical child sex abuse and episcopal mismanagement internally. I intend to argue here that despite these efforts, the Holy See is still largely missing in action when it comes to constructing, embracing, embedding a credible children's rights ethos throughout the universal church, in its laws, in its teachings, its practices, and its polemic. From the time that Professor Lauritsen mentioned back in 1990, when the Catholic Church offered huge support for the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child of 1989, the Holy See has now fallen behind the curve of history as the developing story of children's autonomous rights and protections evolves at international level, at national levels, in ways that would have seemed unlikely just a generation ago. There are any number of cogent examples of evolving attitudes to what constitutes violence against children and what constitutes a child's right to freedom from violence. from the contemporary global crusade against harmful LGBTI conversion therapies, practiced mainly by faith-based organizations, including the Catholic Church, to the even more advanced crusade against the use of corporal punishment in schools and in the home. And here are ready-made issues where Catholic Church leadership, by actively engaging with modern research, intellectual discourse, and especially, of course, with the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, it could help to change the face of the earth. The Committee on the Rights of the Child has emphatically told all state parties to the Convention, which includes the Holy See, that the Convention outlaws all forms of corporal punishment, including by parents. It has warned that children and adolescents are particularly vulnerable to the practice of conversion therapy. Now, many state parties to the Convention have banned corporal punishment, and increasing, though still small numbers, have outlawed conversion therapy, particularly where it involves children under the age of 18, and a number of countries, including my own, are planning to do so. The Catholic Church is on the wrong side of both practices, according to the Committee on the Rights of the Child. If we look more closely at corporal punishment, where the evolution in thinking is well advanced, the Church's position is quite revealing. For centuries, corporal punishment of children in schools and at home was taken for granted. It was not seen as a form of violence against children. It was not seen as abuse. It was not seen as an infringement of a child's rights. Today, in international children's rights law, it is seen as all those things. It is undoubtedly still a vexed and a contentious issue, but it is an issue in transition. Corporal punishment in schools is now outlawed in over 100 countries, but there remains a greater reticence around state intervention in the use of corporal punishment by parents, which has been prohibited only in a minority of countries, but it is a growing number. According to Patrick Lenta, in his recent philosophical work on corporal punishment, worldwide, 4 out of every 5 children aged between 4 and 14 experiences corporal punishment in the home, many also in school. You might think, Lenta says scathingly, that this state of affairs might have attracted the attention of moral and social philosophers, but in fact, they have contributed no more than scattered remarks. He could have added Catholic theologians, canon lawyers, anthropologists, the Pontifical Council for the Family, now part of the Dicastery for Family, Laity and Life, the former Congregation for Catholic Education, and the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. These are parties which might have been expected to have contributed something to this burgeoning debate, but they have contributed precisely nothing. Pope Francis has contributed only an off-the-cuff remark in favour of parental use of corporal punishment. This failure to engage is all the more difficult to understand in the light of a series of comprehensive and very disturbing government-commissioned reports from around the world, from the most sophisticated democracies in the world, which presented compelling portraits of systemic, excessive, and oppressive physical abuse in Catholic institutions and schools where corporal punishment was permitted by law. These reports alone should have pushed the Holy See into, at the very least, serious scholarly engagement with world expertise on this subject, to say nothing of serious scholarly engagement internally on its laws and teachings which support corporal punishment. There are other compelling reasons why the Holy See should be actively involved in recasting traditional, long-standing perceptions of what constitutes violence against children. The first reason has to do with the substantive, moral, pastoral, educational, and welfare role the Holy See uniquely plays in the lives of children worldwide. In that global context, there are clearly conflicting views on corporal punishment from state to state, from culture to culture, from religion to religion. The second reason is that the Holy See is a state party to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and as such, it is obliged to respect and to implement in its own jurisdiction the Article 19 provision which outlaws violence against the child. And here, there is no room for doubt or debate. The absolutely unambiguous view of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, which monitors state party implementation of the Convention, is that all forms of corporal punishment of children, no matter how light, no matter by whom, no matter what circumstances, they are always wrong and always a breach of the child's rights. The committee has discussed this matter with representatives of the Holy See and in strong terms has said that Catholic Church teaching on this matter is wrong, that the Holy See is in breach of its state party obligations under the Convention by continuing to condone corporal punishment within the teaching of the Universal Catholic Church. And I want to examine for a moment both of these compelling reasons, for they are very revealing of the Holy See's attitudes to children's rights in general, its nuanced attitude to violence against children in particular, and the Holy See's self-ideation as a champion of children. To return to the first reason, which concerns the role of the Holy See as the source of governance, teaching, and laws for the Universal Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has over 1,300,000 members distributed unevenly across 5 continents and many nations. That is 1 in 6 of the world's population. It is the leading Christian denomination in the world. Among its adherents, there are over 300 million child members to whom it owes a very special duty of pastoral care, precisely because they are children. Saint Pope John Paul II put it this way: in the Christian view, our treatment of children becomes a measure of our fidelity to the Lord himself. The Catholic Church is the world's largest non-governmental provider of education and welfare services to children right around the world. Not all of them are Catholics. In 2015, there were around 60 million children in 200,000 Catholic schools spread across 5 continents. That number is even greater now. The Catholic Church, with its extensive reach to children through home, parish, school, and diocese, is one of the most significant non-governmental contributors to the lives of children on planet Earth. It's already a world leader in campaigning against child poverty and lack of education, in supporting international efforts to prevent child trafficking, child pornography, protecting children in conflict zones, child workers, migrant children. Few organizations in the world are as perfectly placed to persuade against the violence experienced by children in schools and homes, and to give children a voice in that debate. And yet, it remains aloof. Corporal punishment has been such a widespread and historically accepted phenomenon, especially where religious influence is strong, that it has been overlooked time and time again by the Holy See as a significant factor in the creation and the sustaining of cultures where children are silenced and rendered particularly vulnerable by powerful hierarchical, social, state, and ecclesial systems and practices that give prioritized agency and reduced accountability to privileged cohorts of adults such as parents, pastors, and teachers. It is true that within the broad membership of the Catholic Church, there exists a spectrum of views on the use of corporal punishment in Catholic schools and homes, from those who are adamantly in favour to those who are adamantly opposed. An early opponent of corporal punishment was the famous Catholic educator St. John Bosco in the late 19th century. More recently, Archbishop Gregory Aymond of New Orleans said, "I do not believe the teachings of the Catholic Church as we interpret them in 2011 condone corporal punishment. It is hard for me to imagine in any way, shape, or form Jesus using a paddle." Contrast his words with Pope Francis's words to a gathering of many thousands in Rome. He said this, "One time I heard a father say that in order to discipline his children, at times I have to hit my children a bit, but never in the face, so as not to humiliate them." The Pope's response was to say, "That's great. He had a sense of dignity. He should punish, do the right thing, and then move on." Of the two views, Pope Francis's is the more consistent with the global historical perspective which tolerated and even encouraged the corporal punishment of children as a necessary form of child discipline, a perspective still widely accepted. Archbishop Aymond's is more consistent with liberal contemporary thinking, influenced by the child's right to bodily integrity and modern scientific research, which does not find corporal punishment to be damage neutral or effective, but the reverse. Crucially, it is Pope Francis's view that is consistent with Catholic Church teaching, which is to be found in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. In its section on parental disciplining of children, the Catechism doesn't use the term corporal punishment. It doesn't use those words. It doesn't need to. Instead, it quotes approvingly from the Old Testament book of Sirach. It says, "He who loves his son will not spare the rod." This quotation is taken from a section of the book of Sirach in which it is clear that physical punishment of children is not only regarded as appropriate, effective, and even desirable as a form of discipline, but it is a showcase of parental love and a way of securing obedience. "Bow down his neck," it says, "while he is young, and beat his sides while he is a child, lest he grow stubborn and regard thee not, and so be a sorrow of heart to thee." The contrast between the Old and New Testaments regarding corporal punishment of children is noteworthy. The Old Testament repeatedly calls for the use of corporal punishment of children. The New Testament is silent on the matter. The Catechism's view that physical punishment of a child by a parent is a manifestation of love is unambiguous. Unambiguous, too, is the contradictory view taken by the Committee on the Rights of the Child, and this presents a real difficulty for Pope Francis, for the Holy See, and for the Catholic Church today. As I said, the Holy See is a state party to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The Committee on the Rights of the Child, responsible for routine monitoring of the implementation by state parties of the Convention, is emphatic. Corporal punishment of children in all settings, whether school, home, judicial, for whatever reason, is contrary to the rights of the child. In the view of the committee, it offends the child's dignity, it is not justified as a disciplinary technique, nor is it justified by appeals to religious freedom. For, as Lenta points out, some Christians interpret the tenets of their faith as permitting, encouraging, and even requiring the use of corporal punishment as a disciplinary technique. The Catholic Church is foremost among such Christians. The Holy See, having previously discussed and indeed spontaneously raised contentious issues of church teaching and canon law with the Committee on the Rights of the Child, now claims that the Committee on the Rights of the Child has no right whatever under the Convention to deal with internal church matters like its teachings or its canon law. It claims that as a religious entity, a spiritual entity, it is only obliged to implement the Convention in the place where it has a physical territory, that is, the Vatican City state. Beyond that, it claims it has only the obligation to advocate to the world in general on behalf of the Convention, to a global audience. The Committee on the Rights of the Child rejects these limitations on the Holy See's state party obligations out of hand. It's all a very far cry from 1980, when the idea for the Convention was mooted and its drafting strongly influenced by children's champion and Catholic priest Canon Joseph Merman. The Holy See participated actively in the travaux préparatoires, and when the United Nations General Assembly opened the Convention to the nations of the world for signature and ratification, the Holy See, as you've heard, was the fourth to ratify, among the very first to ratify, stating in its accompanying declaration, "The Holy See regards the present Convention as a proper and laudable instrument aimed at protecting the rights and interests of children." The Holy See fully accepts that its ratification of the Convention effectively created two state parties: the international spiritual entity, the Holy See, that governs the entire Catholic Church. That's the first one. The second one is the tiny Vatican City state, the smallest state in the world, about the size of an average 18-hole golf course. This, of course, is governed by the Holy See and is where it locates its administrative headquarters. It is true that the Holy See is not like all other state parties. It has, however, a long history of collaborating with many United Nations subsidiary bodies, specialized agencies, international intergovernmental organizations, but it is not a member of the United Nations. However, alone of all the world's faith systems, it has permanent observer status at the United Nations, a status which the Holy See itself insisted on obtaining. This confers on it substantial participation rights in the work of the United Nations General Assembly. As a permanent observer, it can sign and ratify United Nations treaties. When it does so, it takes on precisely the same obligations as every other state party. And all state parties who have ratified the Convention freely pledge in Article 2.1 to respect and ensure the rights set forth in the present Convention to each child within their jurisdiction. State parties are obliged by Article 4 to undertake all appropriate legislative, administrative, and other measures for the implementation of the rights set out in the treaty. And these obligations are intended to ensure the realizing of the Convention's rights within the domain, within the jurisdiction of the individual state party. And as I've mentioned, they must account for their progress through regular reports to the Convention's monitoring body, the Committee on the Rights of the Child. So according to the Committee on the Rights of the Child, when the Holy See ratified the Convention, it made a commitment to implement the Convention not only within the territory of the Vatican City State, but also as the supreme power of the Catholic Church worldwide through individuals and institutions under its authority. Among the UNCRC's, the Convention's provisions, is Article 19. It obliges state parties to take all appropriate legislative, administrative, social, and educational measures to protect the child from all forms of physical or mental violence. The Convention does not specifically mention corporal punishment, but the Committee on the Rights of the Child, which is the guide and interpreter of the provisions, has issued 2 general comments on corporal punishment, both of which tell state parties emphatically that they must, in the words of the committee, move quickly to prohibit and eliminate all corporal punishment and all other cruel or degrading forms of punishment of children, and they must undertake the necessary legislative and other awareness-raising and educational measures necessary to end the practice of corporal punishment. The current state of play between the Holy See and the Committee on the Rights of the Child on this subject is one that reflects no credit, no credibility on the Holy See. Here are the simple facts. Under the terms of the Convention, the Holy See should by now have submitted 7 periodic progress reports to the committee, setting out and discussing how it has implemented the Convention. In fact, so far, it has submitted only 2 periodic reports, the first in 1994, the second in 2011. Nothing since. The first reporting cycle was a very tame affair. Remarkable. Neither side mentioned the clerical abuse scandals within the church. Corporal punishment was raised by the committee in an oral session held in Geneva with representatives of the Holy See, and Father Raymond Roch for the Holy See would not condemn it outright, arguing that the matter was complex and depended on how the punishment was administered. If done lovingly, he said, in an age-sensitive way, with moderation and discretion, it was acceptable. But if motivated by hatred, then it was not. He argued that corporal punishment should not be banned until there was agreement among all the relevant professionals. The delegation was left in no doubt that the Committee on the Rights of the Child disagreed with this view. The discussion, of course, was not about the Vatican City State. The discussion was about universal church teaching. Implementing the convention in the Vatican City State was dismissed as irrelevant by the Holy See in its own written report. It asserted that the Vatican City State was a mere workplace for Vatican officials. It didn't have children. That was actually untrue. The second periodic report was submitted in a very changed context. The clerical abuse scandals were now to the fore. The Holy See had meanwhile ratified and submitted two additional reports on two additional optional protocols to the convention, which it had also ratified, one on the sale of children, one on children in armed conflict. Notably, the Holy See had not then, and still has not, ratified a third optional protocol which sets up a complaints procedure. The initial reports on the two optional protocols and the second report on the convention itself were submitted, and for the first time they contained substantially expanded information on the Vatican City State, including the disclosure for the first time that there were in fact quite a number of children residing within the Vatican City State. The Holy See itself was the first to raise the issue of clerical child abuse during the discussion on the OPSC, the sale of children optional protocol. The Holy See itself voluntarily referenced the new child protection measures the Church had introduced for the universal Church, and it cross-referenced its teachings as set out in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. There was in the correspondence between the Holy See and the committee no hint, no suggestion that the Holy See believed these discussions to be ultra vires, outside, in other words, the remit of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, as it would later claim in 2014. They were manifestly not confining the discussion to the Vatican City State. There was considerable dismay on the part of the convention when, at the end of the second reporting cycle, the Holy See markedly revised its understanding of its state party obligations. 20 years after ratification, the Holy See claimed for the first time that implementation demands and needs a territory. For the first time said that it only was obliged to implement the convention and its optional protocols within the Vatican City State. It then accepted that it had a general obligation as global moral authority to promote the principles of the UNCRC, the convention, to the world at large. It asserted absolutely, without any nuancing, that it has no obligation to change its universal teachings or canon law to conform to the convention. Moreover, it said, discussing its teachings, discussing its canon laws, are outside the domain of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. The Committee on the Rights of the Child could not have been more surprised, could not have disagreed more strongly. It didn't help that on the subject of corporal punishment, which the Committee on the Rights of the Child had again raised, this time in writing, the Holy See misled the Committee on the Rights of the Child. Here is how the Holy See replied in writing to the committee's query about its teaching on corporal punishment. On the international level, the Holy See says, the Holy See does not promote corporal punishment. And with regard to corporal punishment by parents, in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the terms corporal punishment or punishment are not used. Both statements are, to put it diplomatically, misleading. The Catholic Catechism unambiguously supports, even encourages, parental use of corporal punishment. As I said earlier, it didn't need to mention the words. It just had to use the extract from the Book of Sirach. The Holy See has never, ever championed the ending of corporal punishment on the international level. The Committee on the Rights of the Child pursued the matter with the Church's delegation, and Archbishop Tomasi, then the permanent representative at Geneva, and Bishop Scicluna agreed at the oral hearing in Geneva that they would take the issue of corporal punishment back to the Holy See for discussion. That's where the matter rests. It has never been discussed. In its hard-hitting concluding observations, the Committee on the Rights of the Child criticised the failure of the Holy See to acknowledge that corporal punishment is outlawed by the Convention, and asked it to enact guidelines and rules clearly banning corporal punishment of children in Catholic schools or Catholic institutions with and for children and in the home. It recommended that the Holy See ensure that an interpretation of the Scriptures as not condoning corporal punishment is reflected in the teaching and other activities of the Church and incorporated into all theological education and training. To date, none of those things have been done. But in 2019, the Holy See banned corporal punishment of children by Vatican employees in the Vatican city-state. That will not be enough, of course, to meet the expectations of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. But one does wonder why, if the Holy See has outlawed corporal punishment in the Vatican city-state, it does not make the same change in its teaching for the universal Church. It has effectively created its own anomaly. As a leading global moral voice and the leading Christian global voice, which is facing terminal decline in the West, partly fueled by its history of ignoring the plight of child victims, here is a God-given issue on which the Holy See could bring light to the darkness of millions of children worldwide, could be the children's champion par excellence, but it is not. Why the resistance? In truth, however, the Holy See's next report to the Convention on the Rights of the Child will have to deal with much more than corporal punishment, because the debate on violence against children has moved on meanwhile to other related issues, like, for example, conversion therapy, misogyny, homophobia, in which the Church and its teachings are deeply implicated. There is also an extensive list of outstanding issues which the Committee expects the Holy See to have dealt with. They include insistence that the Holy See establish a comprehensive review of its normative framework, including canon law, to ensure it is fully compliant with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. It has not done so to date, though it has introduced minor changes to canon law to provide new abuse reporting procedures and accountability for mechanisms for bishops and religious superiors, as well as new crimes and punishments, all related to clerical sex abuse offences. Nor has it introduced, as recommended by the Committee, a high-level mechanism to coordinate implementation of children's rights throughout the Church and its institutions, though, again, in 2013, it created a special office in Vatican City State to oversee the implementation of international agreements to which the Vatican City State is a state party. And that, of course, includes the Convention on the Rights of the Child, leading the other Holy See, leading to yet another Holy See created anomaly, that the 36 children in Vatican City State can rely on the protection of the Convention because the Holy See is a state party, but the over 300 million children who are Catholics cannot. The Holy See has yet to introduce training on the Convention into Catholic schools, educational programs, teacher training programs, and seminaries. The Holy See has agreed to review canon law with a view to abolition of the status of illegitimacy. That was also agreed back in 2011. It has not yet done so. Again, the Committee on the Rights of the Child will be particularly interested in the changes made recently to the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, created by Pope Francis in 2014. At that time, the committee welcomed its creation, but urged that it should be an independent body capable of investigating allegations of clerical child abuse and administrative mishandling of such cases. It is none of those things. It has none of those powers. It has had nothing to say on the subject of corporal punishment or conversion therapy. And initially, while it operated independently of the Curia, in 2022, just a few months ago, it was subsumed into the disciplinary section of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, a curial body which a former member of the Commission, Mary Collins, accused of obstructing the Commission's work, as a result of which she resigned. There has to date been no resolution of the impasse in the relationship between the Committee on the Rights of the Child and the Holy See. The Holy See remains a state party to the Convention, with all the obligations that entails. In that regard, it has been a poor performer, but worse than that, it has thrown away its credibility as a champion of children and a champion of Christ. The Holy See now has a mountain to climb if it is to get that credibility back. For the sake of children, for the sake of Christ, corporal punishment could be, should be, a good place to start, and an even better place to help end the most enduring, pervasive, and ill-conceived form of violence against children. Just for one moment, imagine, could we really believe in a Christ who would express love of a child by hitting a child? I think not. Thank you very much for your attention.
Travel all over this world, and now to another I go. And I know that good quarters are waiting to welcome old Rosin the Bow. To welcome old Rosin the Bow. To welcome old Rosin the Bow. And I know that good quarters are waiting to welcome old Rosin. Been laid out on the counter, once you will hear from below. So I sent down a hogshead of whiskey to drink with a rose in the bowl. To drink with a rose in the bowl. To drink with a rose in the bowl. Sent down a hogshead of whiskey to drink with a rose in the bowl. Those stout fellows and stack them all up in a row. Drink out of half-gallon bottles to the memory of rising the bowl. To the memory of rising the bowl. To the memory of rising the bowl. Drink out of half-gallon bottles to the memory of rising the bowl. Fear that old tyrant approaching, that cruel, remorseless old foe. And I lift up my glass in his honor, take a drink without rising the bowl. Take a drink without rising the bowl. Take a drink without rising the bowl. And I lift up my glass in his honor, take a drink without rising the bowl. Traveled all over this world, and now to another I go. And I know that good quarters are waiting to welcome old rising the